It's 4:47 in the morning. The air is cold, the kind of cold that bites through your jacket and settles in your chest like a warning. Somewhere on a quiet street in the Phoenix metropolitan corridor, yet a federal agent's hand is trembling, not from the cold, not from fear, but from what he is holding in his latex-gloved fingers. A ledger, a single spiral-bound notebook, water-stained on the edges, the ink slightly smeared, but the numbers? Crystal clear. Columns of payments, initials beside dollar amounts with 6 zeros, and at the bottom of one particular page, a signature that would, within the next 24 hours, detonate one of the most significant narcotics prosecutions the American Southwest has ever seen. 3 million pills? Let that number breathe for a second. 3 million pills. Every single one laced with fentanyl, a synthetic opioid so lethal that a dose the size of a few grains of salt can stop a human heart. The DEA estimates the street value of the pipeline feeding those pills into communities across 5 states at $540 million. That is not a typo. That is not an estimate rounded for drama. That is the cold, documented, federal record. 16 suspects. Cartel connections stretching from a warehouse district in Arizona down through the Mexican border and deep into Sinaloa infrastructure. And a network so deliberately constructed, so surgically embedded inside legitimate business, that agents had been building this case for 18 months before a single door was breached. But to understand how this happened, we need to go back 72 hours. 72 hours before those agents stood in that warehouse, a joint DEA FBI task force was operating out of a nondescript office building in central Phoenix. No signage on the door, no marked vehicles in the lot, just analysts, screens, and a wall covered in photographs, red string, and printed bank statements. A constellation of criminality that had taken a year and a half to map. At the center of that constellation was a man known publicly as a legitimate freight logistics operator. His company, registered under the name Desert Gateway Logistics, LLC, filed regular tax returns, employed 43 people, and maintained a clean compliance record with the Arizona Department of Transportation. He coached youth soccer on Saturdays. His wife sat on the board of a local nonprofit. His LinkedIn profile described him as a supply chain innovator. But behind the public profile, federal investigators had uncovered a second architecture, a shadow operation of extraordinary sophistication. Encrypted messaging applications changed weekly to coordinate shipment schedules. Shell accounts layered through 3 separate LLCs in Nevada, each one a single step removed from the next, designed to launder cartel-sourced proceeds into what appeared to be routine freight revenue. Offshore wire transfers routed through accounts in Belize. A second bookkeeping system, the real one, maintained on an air-gapped laptop that never connected to the internet, found taped inside a falseback filing cabinet in the target's private office. This wasn't improvisation, this was engineering. When the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit had traced irregular cash movements beginning in late 2022, amounts just below federal reporting thresholds, a tactic known as structuring. $19,000 here, $18,500 there. Drip-fed into dummy payroll accounts to create the illusion of a functioning business with legitimate employee overhead. It was meticulous, it was patient, and it worked until a confidential informant inside the distribution chain handed investigators the thread that would unravel everything. The DEA confirmed via court documents that the operation had been processing fentanyl pill shipments disguised inside commercial cargo. Auto parts, restaurant equipment, industrial hardware, moving through 3 designated distribution hubs across the Phoenix metro area. And the first hub was in a self-storage facility. The second was a converted auto repair shop. The third was inside a licensed warehouse with active state permits. All of it above ground, all of it hiding in plain sight. Dawn breaks gray over the east side of Phoenix. 4:31 a.m. 47 federal agents, split across 3 simultaneous entry teams, received the green light through their earpieces. The order is one word: execute. The first team hits the self-storage facility. The bolt cutter shears through the padlock in under 4 seconds. The rolling door screams upward on its tracks, and the smell reaches them before their flashlights do. A dense chemical bitterness, synthetic and sharp, hanging in the enclosed air like a fog that doesn't belong to any weather pattern. Pallets, floor to ceiling, wrapped in industrial plastic, stacked with the kind of precision you associate with a pharmaceutical warehouse, because in a grotesque sense, that's exactly what this was. 3 million, 142,000 fentanyl-laced pills, pressed into identical blue tablets stamped M30, designed to be indistinguishable from legitimate pharmaceutical oxycodone. Beside them, 14 kilograms of fentanyl powder, raw and uncut, enough to be lethal in quantities invisible to the naked eye. Agents in full hazmat protocol move carefully. No sudden movements, no unprotected surfaces. At the auto repair shop, the second team finds something different. 2 vehicles on hydraulic lifts, both with custom fabricated fuel tank voids, hidden compartments welded seamlessly into the chassis. One contains heat-sealed bags of processed fentanyl, the other contains cash, or bundled, banded, and stacked $4,800,000 in United States currency, physical cash, the kind that doesn't ask questions and doesn't generate a wire receipt. The third location, the licensed commercial warehouse, is where it becomes personal. Because on the desk inside the site manager's office, agents find a folder, printed invoices, but paper clipped to the back of those invoices are routing confirmations, internal documents that match, date by date, the encrypted messages recovered from the primary target's phone during a prior surveillance window. At the bottom of one document is a wet ink signature, not the logistics operator's signature, someone else's, an individual whose name appears on a different kind of public record, a federal contractor ID. That single signature weights a 3 square inches of ink on recycled office paper connected this operation not just to cartel supply lines, but to a layer of the operation that investigators had suspected, but until that morning could not prove. The pipeline had insider access. Someone with credentials, someone with clearance, and someone as of 6:14 a.m. that morning in federal custody. Here is what the headlines won't tell you. This was not a bust. It was a discovery. There is a difference, and that difference is everything. A bust implies you've stopped something. What federal investigators uncovered in Phoenix is more accurately described as a single visible node in a network that does not operate like a criminal organization. It operates like a franchise, a corporate franchise. And the Sinaloa cartel, which federal prosecutors have now formally linked to this operation in court filings, has spent the better part of a decade perfecting that business model. Think about what a franchise actually means. You don't need to teach every operator how to build the machine from scratch. You hand them the blueprint, you give them the supply chain, the distribution model, the financial laundering infrastructure, and the protocol for managing risk. You collect your percentage, and when one franchise location goes down, the blueprint survives. Because the blueprint lives somewhere else. That is exactly what this operation was. The Phoenix corridor was one node. According to court documents and DEA briefings reviewed by federal reporters, this same logistical structure, say the freight company as cover, the Shell LLCs, one of the air-gapped financial records, the M30 counterfeit press, has appeared in case documentation connected to busts in Tucson, Las Vegas, Albuquerque, and most recently, Memphis. Different cities, different operators, identical architecture. And the architecture doesn't just cover the drugs, it covers the protection. Among the 16 suspects arrested, federal charging documents include not only logistics operatives and cartel-linked distributors, but also a former law enforcement administrative contractor, a licensed pharmacist, and a city permit inspector whose office had signed off on 2 of the 3 warehouse locations involved in the operation. Each of them held a different piece of the puzzle. Each of them was, in the language of organized crime, a franchise employee, with a specific role, a specific paycheck from the operation, and a specific reason to look the other way. The blueprint isn't improvised, it's inherited, it's tested, it's refined, and it has been running with enough success that 16 individual human beings believed, with genuine confidence, that they would never be caught. The morning of the raid, they learned what happens when the blueprint gets exposed. Before we talk about what comes next, before we follow the thread that federal investigators are still pulling, we have to stop here. Because behind every statistic in this story, there is a family. Her name is Maria. She's 31 years old and lives in Tempe, Arizona. Her younger brother, Daniel, was 24. He was found unresponsive in his apartment in March of last year by a neighbor who noticed his lights never went off. The medical examiner's toxicology report identified fentanyl as the cause of death. He had taken a pill he believed was a prescription painkiller. It was a counterfeit M30. It came from a pipeline that federal prosecutors now believe originated inside the same Phoenix distribution network dismantled in this raid. Maria did not learn that until a federal victims advocate called her 9 months after Daniel's death. 9 months. She told investigators, And her words appeared in a submitted victim impact statement. He didn't know what he was taking. Nobody told him what it really was. Nobody told him. That is the human cost of a franchise, not faceless overdose statistics. Real people, real families, real grief that outlasts the arrests, outlasts the press conferences, and outlasts the headlines. And now, the twist that federal prosecutors have not fully disclosed publicly, one of the 16 arrested is cooperating. He isn't the top of the chain. The person at the top has not been charged, is not in custody, and according to sources close to the investigation, is already operating in a different city. Federal agents have a name for operations like this. They call them Hydra operations, because every time you cut off a head, the infrastructure, if left intact, grows two more. Operation Metro Surge, the multi-agency task force behind this Phoenix raid, is not standing down. According to federal law enforcement sources, active warrants tied to the same network have already been filed in 2 additional jurisdictions. The next city is not a rumor. The next raid is not a question of if. It is a question of when you hear about it. 16 arrested, 3 million pills off the streets, $540 million in pipeline revenue dismantled. But the blueprint is still out there, being passed, being copied, being handed to the next operator in the next city who believes they've built something untouchable. They haven't, and will be here when it falls. If this story hit different, if you believe the truth deserves to be louder than the silence around it, then tap like right now. Drop expose in the comments if you want us to go deeper. And subscribe, because the next part of this story, you do not want to miss it. It gets worse before it gets better. It always does.